Hi Submarine friends. Well, I've been quite busy working on my dual deep worker here, getting it ready for our treasure hunting expedition this spring in Cooney Lake. So the first thing that I've done is I've made the chassis so that it drops away from the part that I sit in. So it's called a jettisoning chassis. So that is all done. So what it has is a rotating shaft that goes through the hull and into the chassis, and it's just a lock. So when you turn it, it releases, chassis drops away. That is a very big safety feature because anything that gets entangled in the arm, thrusters, or chassis doesn't matter because this part will just go shooting to the surface as soon as I release the chassis. But to make that work, these two high pressure tanks have to be connected to the submarine part now instead of the chassis, because I don't want to have a disconnect in the high pressure lines. So it's simpler to just make these tanks ride up with the submarine hull. So I've moved them to this location. They're bolted in place now. Now I just have to make a nice fiberglass cover for them to protect them, and it'll also look better. But I can't do that until the ballast tanks are back on, because I want it all to flow and look nice. So this part is done. So now what I'm working on is the airline disconnect. So one of these tanks feeds air to the forward ballast tank, which stays with the submarine, so no problem there. But the electric thruster motors, they have air pressure going inside the motor. So there's a regulator right here that takes the pressure from 3,000 psi to 160 psi. Then there's a line that carries the air to the front, which is used for that ballast tank. So it's 160 psi above ambient. So let's say the water pressure is 100, it's always 160 pounds above the water pressure, so it would be 260 pounds. So from there, it branches off to another one of these regulators that drops it to 2 psi. And that 2 psi is 2 psi above ambient. So if the water pressure is 100, there's 102 psi coming out of those airlines. Those airlines feed the electric motors. So the air pressure inside the electric motors is 2 psi above ambient. So again, if the water pressure is 100 psi trying to leak inside, it won't, because the internal pressure is 102 psi. Now, that all works terrific. The motors don't leak. I love it. But I need to disconnect that airline from the motors so that the chassis can drop away. So what I've done is I've rigged up a system here, right down in here, and it's just an air hose connector. So the way it's mounted is, there's a manifold here. See, now watch, I'm just going to pull it off. See that? So this is the manifold that just plugs in to the regular air coupler like you would have on your compressor at home. And then from here, this manifold branches off to send air to each motor plus the electric arm. That was a big, long, complicated explanation, wasn't it? Anyways, the electric arm also needs an air supply so the electric actuators don't leak. So the pressure inside the actuator is greater than the water pressure surrounding it. So the air is trying to get out rather than water trying to get in. So this all works fantastic, but it needs a disconnect. So when the chassis drops off, the submarine goes to the surface, this part stays behind with the motors, the other part of the airline stays with the submarine hull, and it's a shut off. It's just like on the end of your air hose on your compressor, that shuts off. So that's what I'm working on today. So I've got that part mounted, I've got the manifold built. Now I have to run all the airlines to each motor, which I would like to do once the ballast tanks are back on so that I can route things properly. Actually, I'll probably run the airlines to the front first and do the aft connections once the tanks are on. I mean, the motors are connected to the tanks anyway, so they need to be on. Oh, that was a lot of explaining. I hope that you guys were able to follow that. But anyways, that's what has to be done. Now, once these airlines are done, I just have to clean up some wiring underneath. I've also made a mount for an oxygen tank to ride up with this. You always want your oxygen tank to stay with the submarine for obvious reasons. And so it's just a matter of installing the oxygen tank and connecting it. And the drop chassis conversion is all done. Wasn't a big deal. But it's a really, really, really nice feature. It gives me that warm, fuzzy feeling when I dive. You know, I can dive 500 feet in this. I don't want to be trapped on the bottom of the lake, so I can just release this thing. This part shoots to the surface at Mach blur, and it just sits on the surface in a vertical or in an upright orientation because it is also ballasted. And obviously with the domes at the top, it's lighter at the top than the bottom. So that's it for today. I'm pretty pooped, so tomorrow I will start running airlines. Ciao.